take a leap. Hi, thank you all for being here. I'll kick it off and talk a little bit about AR and games specifically. Oh, thank you. And then I'll hand it over to Edward, and then we'll leave some space at the end for some Q&A. So please kind of think of some questions, and we'll try to keep this pretty interactive. We're going to be talking today about creating compelling AR experiences for entertainment specifically. So there we go. So let's start out by just talking about what are some trends today in entertainment. So the most common is certainly linear storytelling. This is something we are all undoubtedly familiar with. It's traditional TV, movies, and for us as viewers, we really consume content in a way that is preset for us. It's quite a passive experience, but it allows a lot of control on behalf of the creator in terms of what you want people to experience. Kind of on the opposite spectrum, we have gaming, which is one of the fastest growing segments of entertainment. In gaming, really you give the power to the users to have input and actions that impact the experience they have and the outcomes that they see. Interactivity in entertainment is the zeitgeist of the time, and we're starting to see that really morph into totally new formats for entertainment and new mediums. A good example of this is one of Netflix's latest episodes, which is Bandersnatch. If you guys are all familiar or have checked it out, it is worth looking at. It is a traditional TV episode that allows users to make choices during it that impact the next scene that you see and ultimately the ending. This changes its level of replayability, certainly, engagement, and it's all done through new forms of interaction. So when we think about, next thing, sorry. So when we think about AR, or really when we're thinking about any new technology or format, the first question we should really be thinking about for entertainment is what new interactions does this enable us to have? When AR is applied to the environment around us, it allows us to interact with our world in a completely new way. That's really kind of what we have been focused around. And so that enables you to be a character and you to have this first-person interaction with digital assets in your own space. Another option for what we can see, AR could also be applied to a virtual being. And that could enable you to form a new form of bond or a new type of relationship with a digital entity. And that's what Edward will talk a little bit more about. Okay, I'm Kirin. We already did a little bit of an introduction, but I'm the founder and CEO of Illumix, and we're an integrated gaming and technology studio. So I'm going to talk high level about the steps that someone should think about when you're thinking about creating a really compelling AR entertainment experience. So the first thing, as in all entertainment, is to come up with your concept. And in AR, I think this really translates to what is the fantasy that you are trying to immerse your users in. Maybe it's that dinosaurs still roam the earth today and we can go and interact with them anywhere. Or maybe it's that I'm a wizard and I have the ability to perform magic everywhere. But really, ground zero for AR creation is about what is the world that you want someone to step into and what is their role in the world? What character are they embodying and playing in that space? So this may seem, This may seem like a daunting task, coming up with a world-scale fantasy all at the beginning in addition to figuring out this whole new medium. But I'll throw this out. Fantasies are not new. If you actually look back through the great stories of time or all of the kind of core human experiences, there are themes that consistently connect with people throughout time. And that's really, I think, where people should be searching for inspiration, or what are the things that have always been true, and the challenge becomes for AR, how do we augment them or reinvent them in a new way? So for us at Illumix, our first title is focused in the horror genre. So we're really thinking about something that I think has existed and persisted for years, through centuries, and is something people actually really reconnect to pretty much annually, at least in October, at minimum, of how do you really think about getting scared and that adrenaline rush? And how do we reimagine that sort of experience using AR and do that in a fresh way? Along that theme, the best and probably most popular example of AR today is Pokemon Go. And I think there is probably no better match for coming up with the right concept and the right world to immerse you in. Niantic did exactly this by using AR to put us into the Pokemon world, because this is the Pokemon world, and you are a Pokemon trainer. You just have to believe that Pikachu is outside. And that's literally the only thing that their AR did. But it exactly fit into what that fantasy was. It made you believe that you were a part of that world in a kind of very familiar fantasy, but it being done in a fresh way. And I'll throw out, I think Pokemon Go did one other thing that was very kind of critical to their success. Their core game loop and their core mechanic exactly aligned with the fiction that is Pokemon. Pokemon is, in fact, about walking around the world and catching these creatures. That is the core of the fantasy. And that is the way they really aligned their mechanic. And again, not reinventing the wheel here. Collection is a very proven mechanic throughout gaming, but it was be able to kind of be updated in this new way for a new format. So once you've come up with your brilliant concept and fantasy, and you've kind of figured out how that matches, let's really talk about how do you choose the right mechanic for the type of game you're building, or the type of experience you're building more broadly. So AR can kind of, I think, be split very loosely into two categories. One is really thinking about the spatial components of AR. How are you using your phone in a new way and positional data to move around the space or interact with your kind of room scale space in an interesting way? And then two is how do you think about this at a much larger like world scale? How is the actual space around you, and that can be everything from GPS, weather, actual environmental cues, impacting the content that you see at any given time. And which kind of arm does your game or fantasy experience fit into better? With positional data, honestly, this gives way a lot more to, I think, the novelty gimmicky stuff that doesn't tend to do very well or have that retention. And I think a lot of times it's because that is separated from the idea of being in a fantasy. I don't think many people have super fantasized about playing chess where you can't touch anything, but that's often how it's used. It's a lot of things that we're building because we can. It's something that's more capable, I think, with the technology we have today, but perhaps we need to think about whether we should be building those experiences. On the second hand, we have kind of not pure AR mechanics. A lot of these mechanics don't require the technicality of putting a 3D object in the space, but very much, I think, touches more closely on the fantasy of bringing you into this different world. The gold standard, of course, is how can you do both? How can you have something that actually incorporates the physical positional data at a room scale, but is still immersing you in a world scale fantasy? Finally, executing the experience, for those of you that have tried, is certainly not simple. There are several questions that I think designers need to spend some real time thinking about. And these derive, I think, from a lot of technological limitations and form factor. But I think ultimately, kind of the key gut-wrenching moment is for the user experience. If you're building entertainment, the goal is for it to be for the everyday consumer. And so some of the things amongst a whole list that you should be thinking about are, how do I minimize the setup and initialization time? Are you expecting your users to do this in public? Is the experience really, when you take a hard look at it, something that's worth a different behavior? We've seen examples, Pokemon Go, even selfies, where that has proved that it's worth it to people to do that. Is AR a toggle, right? Is this a necessary part of the experience, or is this sort of optional in that traditional way? And what are the pros and cons of doing both? What's the right duration for the AR experience? So if AR is a core part of your loop, how long are you expecting that component to last for? Is the entire experience in AR, is holding up your phone awkward in this setting? Or does it make sense in the context of the type of experience you've built? And kind of finally, how do you leverage that mobile form factor? Assuming you're going for audience today, figuring out how mobile functions, even if you're doing it across platforms, is going to be an absolutely key component to having something that I think hits audiences in the upcoming few years. It's our kind of personal opinion that you cannot just tell the user what you want them to do. There is a sense of the user should be in control and responsible for their own experience, and that's certainly true. But a lot of that causes more and more barriers to entry, which make this a less simple experience for people. And you have to think, for entertainment specifically, people do not go to entertainment often to go through huge amounts of setups. This is often how people are unwinding. There are a lot, even in traditional games, of people who download but don't actually make it through that FTUI, that first-time user experience. AR increases that barrier, and so part of when you design and think about creating a compelling AR experience has to be, I think, around the mentality of how do I take these limitations and turn them into opportunities? How do we create an AR experience that is actually leveraging some of the limitations? Maybe it makes sense in the context that you are using your phone. Maybe you don't tell people, hey, scan this space, but you find a way to have them do that naturally, where they don't realize what's going on. You have the immediacy of getting into a really powerful experience. And maybe you really think about how long you want those AR components to be, and how do you make that something where it's actually augmenting the experience the users have. It's not a gimmick, it's not something that could be done in mobile, could be done with a physical game or physical board game, but is something that's in that narrow intersection of AR is necessary for making this experience everything that it can be. I'll hand it over to Edward now.
Great. Thanks, Kirin. So I'm just going to start with a video to explain a little bit about a virtual being and what that means.
5 years ago, when we were starting Story Studio, we would tell anyone who would listen that virtual reality was an art form. Today, in every film festival in the world, Sundance, Tribeca, Cannes, Venice, virtual reality is showcased as true art. As we keep exploring, as we keep moving through, the next great art form isn't virtual reality. The next great art form is artificial intelligence.
One of the things I look for as an investor is a shift in human behavior. People are starting to interact with virtual beings on Instagram. They're going to concerts with holograms. The world of entertainment is going to just flourish because of this. And we're just moments away from it.
Whispers in the Night is a virtual being's experience. It's the first time that you get to have a conversation with Lucy, our virtual being.
With Whispers in the Night, we are asking more from our audiences than we've ever asked before.
You spend this emotionally connective moment with Lucy. It's very intimate. Literally talking into a tin can telephone where you can listen and then say things back to her.
Lucy just invites you into her space and she asks you, "Hey, can you hear me?" Lucy starts to talk about how her grandmother used to say this thing, how most people are good. So she starts asking you questions about when was the last time you met a good person and what was their name and did you learn anything from them? We are expanding upon Lucy's senses, her voice, her hearing.
Computer vision to give the character eyes, natural language processing so that the character can speak to us.
We are really asking audiences to open up, to use their voice, to have a conversation with the character, which is this whole new amazing realm.
When you are interacting with Lucy and you're telling Lucy things, Lucy's going to remember.
She's storing those memories, and the potential to use that back in the larger story is incredibly powerful.
Lucy says, "Hey Cyan, how are you doing? What's been up since the last time we saw each other?" What? I mean, that's some futuristic, amazing, and we're now. It's not the future, it's now.
Right now we've got two completely siloed communities, with artificial intelligence going to Neurips, with the filmmakers and virtual reality storytellers going to Sundance. We need to come together and to share ideas and to create new work.
Technology and storytelling are always going to be paired. Whether you go back to the cave and you use shadows from fire, the first piece of technology, or you're talking about machine learning and voice processing and all of these things that are giving us the ability to do these magic tricks.
If you're working on machine learning, you might want to explore storytelling because it may not be obvious. You could be, at the forefront of a movement.
Almost $100 million has been invested into this space.
Arty, Super Plastic, AI Foundation.
Little Makeba, Micah with Magic Leap, Lucy's Fable.
Basically a revolutionary change in how we consume entertainment.
There's a whole community growing up that makes together machine learning engineers, immersive storytellers, of novelists, of neural network designers.
And so that's what makes it so exciting to be on the ground floor watching this stuff happen right now.
That's going to be the team that comes together to create these ongoing virtual beings.
Don't move.
So, a virtual being that's in our world, whether that is on our Amazon Echo Show, our AR glasses, our iPhone, our iPad, virtual reality, our Amazon speaker, a virtual being, not a virtual assistant, a virtual being. So I did Story Studio, which is VR, not AR yet, but we would have gotten there, I'm sure. And now doing Fable. I'm noticing the same issue that Kirin had. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so why now? Why make a virtual being now? Well, it's because of the advances since 2012, when AlexNet ushered in a new rebirth of machine learning. And I believe that by combining and cohering all of our current stage advances, we can bring a virtual being to life in a completely new way. So that means NLP for the ears, computer vision for the eyes, NLG for the mouth, that means natural language generation, synthetic speech for the voice box, natural language understanding for the mind, as well as memory, creativity. So you guys may or may not be familiar with GANs, but I'm sure you've seen "this face is not real," or "computer composes music." Those are usually created, or often created, using generative adversarial networks. OpenAI just created MuseNet a few weeks ago using transformer models that can compose music in any style desired. Imagine if a virtual being was doing that and saying, well, what do you think about what I created, what I composed? Pictionary is now a solved AI problem for a virtual being to be creative and also to see what you're doing. They'll need to have a will and a destiny. They can't be your servant. They have to have a fate beyond how you treat them, an actual fate and heart. So it's an area of machine learning called effective computing, where it combines vocal tone with your face, with pose estimation to decide how you feel. And a virtual being could use that to say, gosh, you look sad. I've been sad in the past. Here's how it was for me. Here's what happened. All right, I'm going to now click. There we go. All right, so ears, so that they can listen to music, hear what you say, hear you laugh. Eyes. Eyes are a lot of things, right? So Google just announced that its Nest Hub is going to come with facial ID for every single person in the family, so that it can provide individualized updates. So it should be able to recognize you, it should be able to dance with you, understand how you're moving, look at your photos. This is a virtually solved problem now, that I could hold up my phone with a photo on it, and a virtual being could identify what it is. It's solved, but nobody really realizes that it's solved because AI is so in the background. Consumers find it very confusing. It's not explained to them in a fun way just how far we've already come. Mouth talk about important and even vulnerable memories. That one isn't quite as far along as computer vision. Clearly, we all use Alexa. It doesn't totally work. So, it's great, but it's not going to be perfect. Voice box, laugh together with you, right? Something that is humane. But also, instead of when you say, hey, could you turn on the light, saying, yes, I can turn on the light, something more humane, like, right? Like we can create a more humane and emotional way to interact with these virtual beings that isn't based on the current class of virtual assistants. A deepening relationship, memory, so I spoke about this before, creativity, Pictionary, paint, write, compose, a will and a destiny so that you guys have to compromise with each other, and a heart so that she can see what you're doing and react to it, see how you're feeling and react to it. So imagine applications where you're cooking together, or where you're painting together, or where you're playing games together. And you're in the game too. Obviously there's a Bitmoji of the virtual being, and there's a Bitmoji of you too. Or doing homework together, or composing music together. And imagine that, again, this virtual being has a life that is separate to you, right? Like, this is not there are some really cool video games where the way that you treat a character defines whether they're on the good path or the evil path, We don't like that for a virtual being. It's not realistic that how one person treats me totally defines who I am and how I am. So everyone should be able to see on Instagram this virtual being's life. What do they do during the day? Chat with them. Learn about their life on YouTube. And across all of these interactions and memory view. So when this virtual being arrives in our lives, they have memories from before they met you. They have memories of what we do together and can cross-reference those things, right, in a very simple way for right now, meaning maybe you talk about loyalty and she has a memory about loyalty, just keywords. We don't have to get completely crazy complex initially. And you know, when I was getting started in virtual reality, there was a big cliche, which is empathy. That's the big idea for virtual reality. And it is. You can be in somebody else's shoes. I think that the big idea for AI is memory, in that you reframe data as memory and it can become love. So why do I remember what someone does to me and how they treat me? Often it's because I really care about them. And I think that we'll feel that if Lucy remembers what we're doing. Maybe this is the last slide. This could be the last slide. There it is. And finally, you can come and hang out and talk at the Virtual Being Summit. We're going to be doing gatherings. And the reason for that is really just like AWE. We need to bring different kinds of people together. And the most important kinds of people that we need to bring together are immersive folks like us and machine learning folks, which really don't interact that much, right? Like, I don't know if anyone here went to NeurIPS, but it's a super cool conference that is nothing like any of our conferences. And we need to bring these two communities together in order to create a virtual being. So now I think we have a little while for questions.